Hello, it's Gareth here. I hope you are well. So in this video, I'm going to talk about simplification and how I believe that simplifying your life can actually lead to more happiness and productivity. So I first got into this idea of simplifying my life. A few years ago, I watched a program called The Minimalists. It was like a little documentary film that two guys had made. And these guys are still about. They're on YouTube. They've got a podcast. And they came up with this idea of simplifying life, the minimalistic way of living life. And there is no shortage, I can tell you now, on YouTube for videos on minimalism. If you look at how people live and the fact that some people, like, they just got nothing in the houses, nothing at all. They like got one plate, one saucer, one set of cutlery. You know, they've got one chair, and you know, you tend to see them wearing kind of, you know, the same clothes every day. And it's kind of it's a movement, and I believe it's a mindset is minimalism. So I was always attracted to this. And despite the fact that that was many years ago now, I have always struggled with getting to a point where simplification felt good to me at a level where I was happier and more productive. But recently, that started to turn. And I would say as recently as the last 2 months. So for the last 2 months, I've been experimenting with dealing with an element of simplification that worked for me, which wasn't the minimalistic approach that many people put out there. And it was a concept that came up to me when I thought I should really have only what's necessary. Okay, only what's necessary. So this turned into this idea of, you know, live your own life. OWN stand the acronym for only what's necessary. So as I go through this video, I'm going to share with you some of the things I've tried to simplify based on the principle of it's not about having nothing or, you know, simplifying a minimalistic approach. It's about only having in life what is necessary, and that's a very different thing. There are two parts to this, really, because I want to address two areas which we tend to find we get overwhelmed with, and we create cluttering, and we can hoard in. And the first thing is your physical stuff, you know, your physical things. There will be things like, you know, we have telephones, we have clothes, we have things in our house, knickknacks, we've got books, anything that can be physically touched, picked up, looked at, moved, if you like, that is stuff that's physical. And that's got a capacity to become cluttered, or if we're not careful, we can have too much stuff. So there's this physical stuff. Then on the other side of that, in the world we live in now, everything's online, you're watching this online. So we also have an element of clutter and stuff in the digital space. So these two areas, obviously very different, but they have the same impact on us mentally. Because for me, when we've got a lot of stuff, a lot of clutter, it causes tension. We can become less happy with more things, both physically and digitally. So I'm going to address the two today and give you a couple of things that I've done in both those areas recently, which have helped me, that you might be able to benefit from. And I can tell you this now, in the last 2 months, this element of peace and happiness and productivity has descended upon me since I started to take this track, this route, if you like, into only what's necessary. So it's simplification, but in my case, it's simplifying so I've only got what is necessary, only what's necessary. Right, so let's start off with physical stuff. One thing I became aware of is, and I don't know whether this is a bloke thing, I know a lot of my male friends do this, females less so much, but men tend to have this idea that when we replace something in the house or something has been used and we've got half of it left, we'll keep it for later. This is my shed, right? So shed, hut, whatever you want to call it, but where you store your stuff, like the place you store your thing in your house. I've got one in the garden, and in there are empty tins of paint. There are half-empty boxes of screws. You know, there are kind of bits of wood that have been offcuts from some jobs I've done, and I keep them just in case. So I think men do this a lot. We keep old technology. You know, I'm recording this on a camera here, which is a nice camera. I love this camera, but I've got an old camera before this one that I've still got in the cupboard in case this one breaks. But it might have had this one a few years now. It's never broke, you know, and that one's getting older, but it's there. It's in case of. So I think we end up sometimes getting stuff in his life and accumulating stuff because we're keeping hold of things when we've replaced it already. So what I did is, the first thing I did is I went through and looked at all the stuff I'd kept in case the thing that replaced it broke. And it was hard. I have to say this was difficult. The first thing that became obvious to me is I have a bookcase just behind me here. And in that bookcase, there were some iPads I use an iPad quite a lot. My current iPad is here. It's I think it's a Generation 9. It's a good little iPad. I love my iPad. Very, very useful tool. Helps me be more productive. I love using this as opposed to a laptop sometimes. So I've always had a MacBook. I've always had a MacBook, yeah, but I've always had an iPad as well. But I had the older versions, the first one I got, then the second one, and the one that replaced that. This is my fourth iPad, so I had the other three. And they're in my cupboard, or in my bookcase here, and I realised I've not touched them for years. They're taking up space, but because they're iPads, I didn't want to throw them away because I thought they're expensive. When you realise now that the first generation iPad is probably worth nothing, and I don't even have a charger for it anymore because the chargers have changed, so I had to throw them away. This was my first bit of resistance that came up to cluttering, because prior to that I just went through the office and I thought, what in this office, in this space here, can I get rid of that's no longer a service requirement? So old paperwork, old pens that were chewed up, bits of old boxes I'd kept. I threw all them away. That was fairly easy. Then I got to the iPads. That became more difficult. And I had to throw them away. So I put them in the bin. And the way I did this, and sometimes this is what you have to do, if you put it somewhere else, you move it out of your office into another room, that's not getting rid of it. That's not simplifying. That's just moving clutter about. I put it in the bin the morning before the bin men came. So we have a bin that I can throw these away in. And rather than putting it in the day before, then I would have a chance to pull it out. As soon as I had the bin wagon that morning, I put it in the bin so that I knew there was no way I could get them iPads back. And it felt weird. It was like this, I don't want to get rid of them, But as soon as I got over that, and I realised 2 days later, my life hadn't changed, and actually I'd got more space in my bookcase, wow, then things started to roll through at a different pace. So what I started to do was I started first to get rid of all the stuff I wasn't using. I did that. Then I started to look at simplifying the office space itself. Like I said, you don't see this, you're on the other side of the camera, but I moved around some lighting and I moved around a couple of cameras. So everything was easy to touch, and everything now is within arm's length of what I need. So if I need my headphones, they're here. If I need a pen and pencil, it's here. If I need my glasses to read things, they're here. I wanted everything. So that was the rule I wanted. I wanted everything close to me. And again, what was necessary. So in my case, what is necessary for me to produce my podcast and my YouTube and the stuff I do on other social media is 2 cameras, 2 ring lights, a laptop, a microphone, and my pair of glasses. All these things are now close to me. And these are what's necessary. You could argue I could get away with 1 camera. Yes, I could. And this week I experimented with that. I got rid of one of the cameras off the desk to see if I could use one. It was clunky. There were some things one camera did, the other one didn't, for specific reasons. I do a live on a morning on Facebook, and one camera was better for that than the other. So it involves a lot of tweaking and playing. And like I say, you're not going to a stage where you just want rid of everything. You just want to make sure everything you've got is necessary. So right now, my desk, everything on this desk is necessary. There's not one thing I can add to it that I need, and there's not one thing I can take off it to make it more simple. This is the only what's necessary version of my current desk. Okay, so that's what I would first of all suggest you do. Look at your physical stuff. What are you not going to use? What have you kept till later? I'm telling you now, gentlemen, if you're watching this, you don't need that half-empty tin of paint in your garage. So I also got rid of those in the last few days as well. I really kind of got rid of anything that I thought was not necessary. So that's the physical side. What I started to do is I started to realise that when I went onto my computer, when I went onto my iPad, there were lots of apps on there I've not used for years. And I thought, right, so this is an easy one. Just get rid of all the apps you don't use. If you've bought them from Apple or Google, whatever, you'll still have them and you can download them again if you ever need them. But I realised 30% of them I was definitely not needing. I pushed it to over 50%. I got rid of over 50% of the apps on my phone. Once you get rid of those, then all of a sudden the experience on your phone becomes different because you can find the app you want easier. So that started to free up that. And on my iPad especially, there's very few apps on there because I thought, well, I want my iPad really for reading. So there's Kindle app on there. There's the ability to search the internet on there. I've got a browser on there. And I've also got the ability to watch YouTube videos and also listen to podcasts because that's the only thing I kind of do on that particular device. So anything else was surplus to requirements. It was not necessary, so got rid of it. So I did the same thing with the digital stuff as I did with the office. I reduced it down to the simplest way I could. A couple of things when I'd done it, I thought I could do with that. One app in particular, I have to be honest, YouTube, I took that off my iPad, but then I thought, I do like to look at my YouTube and sometimes I need to, so I put the app back on. So you go back to get rid of everything, pull it to one side, Sit in that space, either physical space or digital space. How does this feel? Have you got everything that's necessary? If you're not, put it back. But once you know you're not going to use it, get rid of it. So the app's on there, deleted. So all of a sudden then my digital life starts to become more organised. And then all of a sudden things became easy to find. So when I wanted to look at particular photographs for using on maybe social media, I want to do a blog or a post, think, where's my photographs? I used to have thousands of them. I mean, literally thousands of them. Most of them which were either duplicates or rubbish. I started to get rid of them. So my kind of online storage space reduced. The other thing that I found myself doing was when I go walking on a weekend, I'm a big walker, and I used to take photographs every time I went out walking, and we take photographs. One thing about my walking is I walk in probably 5 different areas. We have 5 areas local to us we walk in on a regular basis. So every time I went there, I found I was taking the same photograph only a month later. And I do like to put them onto to YouTube sometimes and use them on things on here. Or maybe I can put them on as a story onto Instagram. But I realised keeping them was clutter. So I brought in a little rule, which was when I went for a walk, I put them onto my stories and I kept one photograph that reminded me of that day. So one thing of all the pictures I took, and in which case it could have been many, I thought, which one is going to remind me of this particular walk today? And I kept that. So it's not like I was getting rid of everything. I just thought, what's necessary after a walk? It's just a reminder of the day. Because I do like to look back. And sometimes when you see that, what you did 12 months ago, it's interesting to see where you were. So I wanted to keep just one photograph, maximum 2, but I've got it down to 1 now. I tried doing it with more and I found it complicated. So again, what works for you, what's necessary. For me now, I've found that necessary is just 1 photograph, that's all I need. If it's a really good walk, I might keep a couple, but generally just 1. So all of a sudden I'm starting to clear up. I've got less clutter in my space. The space I'm using is more efficient. I'm feeling happy because I can touch a button or reach something and make something I want to happen quickly. So whether it's the podcast, the video, or whether I'm recording something or writing something, it's all, things became easier. I didn't have much confusion because most of our confusion and stress comes from not being able to find something or things being complicated or having too many choices. When we simplify them, we get happier. We become less stressed. We become more productive. So digital space, actual space, those are the 2 areas to look at. Like I say, once you've got rid of something, it's amazing. Even if you were bothered about getting rid of them, like I was with the iPads, 2 days later you realise, actually, I was never going to use them anyway. And it's like a relief. So once you've done that, and this is something I think you can go to a different level if you want, then every day set yourself a task to say one day, or every day I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to get rid of 1 item from my actual stuff, physical stuff, and I'm going to get rid of 1 digital item. Now that 1 digital item could be a photograph, it could be a file, it could be an old download you've got that you don't need anymore. Get rid of at least 1. Same with the physical space. Every day now I'm getting rid of at least 1 thing. Now this morning what I got rid of were a couple of clips actually. I've got a GoPro camera and there's some clips that I never use. I'm now never going to use them. So they're only small clips, but I got rid of some of those. That was my thing I got rid of today. So the challenge I've set myself now is every day to be removing something physical and something digital from what I need that's not necessary. And, will I get to a point where I won't be able to throw anything away? I'm not sure I will, actually, because there's always something that you think you need now, but in 6 months' time you didn't need it anymore. So I think this is a continual process of simplifying things. And I think you can go a step further. And the final thing I want to talk about is how you can simplify your processes and your systems. Everything you do, especially the things you do regularly, there's a kind of a routine you've got for doing it. You might not even know you're doing it. But I guarantee if you do this little experiment, I guarantee when you get up in the morning, you probably put your clothes in the same kind of order. I get up in the morning and I put 1 sock on. It's always my left sock first, right sock first. Now, that's not a conscious decision I make. It's just something I became aware of when I started to think, how do you put your clothes on? How do you brush your teeth? How do you make your coffee? And then within them processes, can it be simplified? So one thing I did, and it's to do with making coffee, I drink a coffee in the morning called a bulletproof coffee. That bulletproof coffee is something I use for my particular diet, a keto diet, but you can check out bulletproof coffee if you haven't heard about it online. And how it worked is we've got these coffee pots. There's 2 of them because maybe missus have one. So you take the bottom of the screw top coffees, you put them in, then they go on top of a stove. So it's a stove top coffee pot. I found that if I just run the hot water for a few seconds and I put that in, instead of it being cold water, it boils quicker, and I can save myself 2 or 3 minutes just literally by letting a tap run for about 10 seconds to get it warm. So I'm also moved where I used to store these coffee pots that always were kept in a cupboard, which I had to walk to, and then realised that why would I put them in that cupboard when there's a cupboard nearer to where I'm going to use them? So I moved them. So sometimes it's looking at your process and routines and how do they become more efficient. So like me recording these videos for YouTube, I've now found a way where I can literally just press a button. I used to have to plug in the microphone and change some leads about, and I found, well, why were I doing that? I didn't need to. So I set it up so I just got to press the button. So when an idea comes, like this one came today for simplification, I can get straight on it. So once you've decluttered your space, physical, and you've got rid of your digital stuff, that becomes an ongoing process. Then start looking at the processes. Can you make some of your processes in your life more simple? Can you simplify everything? It can all be simplified until you're doing in that process just the same with the physical and the digital stuff, that within that process the steps are only what's necessary. If the step's not necessary, get rid of it. Simple as that. So it's kind of something that's an ongoing thing for me, and I wanted to do this video today for 2 reasons. One is it might be of value to you, because I kind of wanted to get across that you don't need to be the minimalist with the black t-shirt and the shaved head. And there's a guy called Leo Babauta, which I suppose he had this thing called Zen something. What was it? I'll remember in a minute. Do you know what? I'm going to find out what it is, because it is important. Is this? 1 second. Leo Babauta runs a blog called Zen Habits, and he was the guy, shaved his head, did all this. He was kind of the minimum. Actually, he was the guy that got me into it before I watched The Minimalist. I must write that slight wrong bit of information. It wasn't The Minimalist that got me into it. Leo Babauta got me into it. I saw The Minimalist, and that's when it kind of became a thing for me. So he's one of these that goes to extreme lengths. And that's probably right for some people, but for most people like me, I'm just wanting to simplify things so I'm actually got a more comfortable life. I'm happier and I'm more productive. I don't need to have the same colour pens and make everything match and everything laid out in lines and all my clothes folded up and put into different sections and orders. I don't need all that. I just want to become happier and more productive and more productive. Well, I should have put my teeth in properly this morning. And I'm thinking there's a lot of people like me. So don't go to extreme lengths. In time, you'll be surprised how far you've come. My setup on my desk now is phenomenally simpler than it was 6 months ago. So by chipping away day by day, by tweaking, trying, changing something, if something doesn't feel like it's working anymore, change it. Can you simplify it? Always asking that question, can I make this simpler? And if you do that, it's surprising how your focus starts to look for ways you can. Even down to the smallest things. I'm not got to the stage yet where I've colour-coded my socks, but what I did do, which is a really savvy tip if you want one, is I buy the same socks and the same underwear. They're all black, and all the socks are exactly the same, which means I've never got odd pairs. I might have one sock on its own, but all the socks are exactly the same. And that was something I came with, thought, why have I got all these different socks? And normally it's because people buy you them as gifts. But when I'm buying my own, I buy the same socks from the same shop. They're all black. So if I lose one, I've lost one. I haven't lost. I made a pair are useless. That was something I did. And again, it's a small tip. What's necessary is socks. What's only necessary for me is only black socks, only black underwear. So there's ways you will find that you will explore this simplification journey. And it's a really interesting one, because I think you'll be surprised how much stuff you actually don't need. It's not necessary. And also you'll find in it things that you're attached to which are more difficult to get rid of. And part of life, I think, is learning to let go. And you know, sometimes the other things we can collect, and I'm going to talk about it in this particular video, but you know, we can do it with contacts and friends. We end up having too many, and maybe some of them aren't necessary, but maybe that's for another video, another day. But for now, if you want to become happier, more content, it's worked for me, start looking at your life and having in it only what's necessary. You're not going to do it overnight, but it becomes a kind of way of thinking, always looking to simplify. Do I need that? If you don't need it, get rid of it. It's not going to be something that you are ever going to regret, because I can tell you now, I've been somebody who was at times in my life been chaotic and very cluttered. To have that ease and peace, it's a game changer. So I hope you've enjoyed that today. If you have enjoyed that today, let me know. If you're new to the channel, it'd be great if you subscribe, give this video a like. And any questions at all you've got about my journey to simplification, or anything you'd like me to talk about in future videos, let me know. And until the next one, take care.